What's happening, guys? Got a simple one for you guys today. We're going to be taking a look at my F124 settings. How have I set up this game? What are my camera settings, force feedback settings, all of that good stuff? Because I know some of you guys have been asking me in the comment section below. So yeah, we're just going to take a quick look into them quickly, just as a disclaimer. A lot of the smaller settings like on display, audio and stuff like that, I'm not really going to get into that in this video. We're just going to keep it simple with the main settings that most people will be looking for. If you do want to know what my on-screen display settings are, just let me know in the comments and I'll literally reply with a screenshot of what they are so that you can copy them if you want to. So for the first one, we are going to be taking a look at the assist real quick. It's going to be the same as it has been pretty much every other year, which is no assist. So I use the elite driving proficiency just simply because I don't use any assists. However, if you do use assists, you might want to use custom or, professional, experienced, amateur, beginner, just whatever suits your style, really. Personally, I think this year the traction control is, I mean, it's not as good as F123 probably, but I still feel like a lot of people can get away with not using traction control. So if you're looking to turn it off, definitely. If you played F122 and you use medium, definitely a time where you can take off traction control. With the dynamic racing line, with the amount of track guides that are out, not even just mine, because a lot of mine are out, well, not necessarily outdated, but they're from a few games back, and some people have a little bit of issues with that. There are track guides on F124. I've seen them on YouTube. There are so many now that you guys can afford to turn off the racing line if you want to. If you don't, then obviously don't. But if you want that challenge, I recommend turning it off. Now for the main one, which I think most people will be looking for, I use a Moser R5 wheel, so obviously it's going to be slightly different for you guys depending on what wheelbase you use. But wheel settings, for my generic settings, I still actually don't know what this first one is supposed to be about, so I just leave it on default. Trigger vibrations, I don't use a controller, so because of that, adaptive triggers and trigger vibrations, I don't really have them on because I don't have the need to. The main one for me in this department is actually the overtake ERS modes. Now, way back in the day, 2018, well, 2019, 2020, I used to use toggle. However, I actually got this from Marcel Kiefer back in 2020, I believe. And he was saying to switch to hold. And it's been a game changer ever since, in my opinion. Because with toggle, it's very easy to forget that you have the ERS on going into a corner, or forget that you've turned it off whilst you're on a straight, and that can lose you time in both directions. Whereas with hold, you know that when your finger's on the button, you're using overtake. As soon as you take your finger off the button, you know that it's not being used, or at least you're not in overtake mode. Therefore, it gives you more control and reassurance over your overtake when it comes to ERS. So highly recommend that you use hold. I mean, if you're using a controller or a keyboard and it's a little bit more difficult, then yeah, maybe use toggle. But if you're using a wheel, it should be simple enough to have hold. Now, for Logitech True Intensity, I don't use the Logitech, so this setting doesn't really mean anything to me. However, I do believe on the G923, I didn't even notice that they're on the screen. The G923, and I believe the new direct Logitech wheel, direct drive Logitech wheel, they use this True Force. So you might want to search up on YouTube or search up on a website. I do believe Sim Racing Setups, he's another YouTuber. I do believe he goes a lot into the Logitech wheels as well. So you can always go over there and check out what settings to use in terms of that. Obviously, I use a Moser, so doesn't really apply to me. So actually getting into it now. Now, when it comes to the control scheme, I actually have a custom control scheme, mainly because the way that Codemasters have set up this wheel originally, in my opinion, is kind of dumb. For example, by default, the accept button, so when you're actually trying to click into things, is actually the B button on the ES wheel, and then to come out of something, so like to go back, is actually the A button, and that's backwards to me, because and like literally everything else, if you want to go into something, you press A, and if you want to come out of it, you press B. So it was just so backwards, I just couldn't take it. So I changed it on the PC. I don't know if you can change it. I actually don't even know if the R5 is even available on consoles. I don't think it is. So if you're on PC, you can change it. You just go into I'll probably have the file path on the screen somewhere, or maybe in the description below. But I believe you go to like the action map settings within the F124 files and you can change it there. So yeah, as for the force feedback settings itself, I've currently got 65 on the strength. This is obviously only 5 Newton meters. So if you have a stronger will, you might want to lower this. And then for the track effects, I have 40, 34 for the rumble strips, 42 for the off track, and then pit stop effects, 50. I don't actually know how that affects my will. I don't think it does. So yeah, I just leave it at default. Wheel dampening, I mean, you can have wheel dampening on the wheel itself through the pit house software, so I usually turn that off. And then maximum rotation. Now, I have heard from some people that the esports drivers have gone back to 320. I may give that a go and see if it helps me out in terms of pace, but at the moment, I'm pretty comfortable with 400. And to be honest, with this year's handling, it just feels a lot easier for me to use 400. So I've got 400 max rotation in game, and then I've got 400 rotation on the actual pit house software as well. And as for the control scheme, I will quickly just scroll through. Obviously, you can slow it down, you can pause it if you need to. But yeah, that's pretty much what I use for the control scheme. The ES wheel doesn't have a lot of buttons available to it, so I can't use, you know, some MFD shortcuts like how some people will with a Fanatec wheel, or even with some of the more fancy Moser wheels. Maybe once I get a fancier wheel, maybe I can use some, but for now, it's pretty much just the basics. For my graphics settings, we'll check out video mode. So I use windowed just because it's easier to go into other applications whilst I'm playing the game, and especially when I'm streaming as well. If I go into another application, the game actually stays up on the stream. Whereas if I had it on just normal full screen, if I was to come out of the game, then it would actually turn off on the stream. So on the stream or on the recording, the screen will go black. So that's the main purpose for me using that. Aspect ratio, I guess that doesn't really mean much. Refresh rate, I use 144 Hertz for all of my monitors. And then, yeah, I play the game at native. So instead of using DLSS, I actually use basically just the native anti-aliasing. And then for the actual graphic settings itself, I use ultra high preset pretty much for everything, except for ray tracing. I turn that off just so that I can get higher FPS, to be honest. I mean, I could turn ray tracing on, but to be honest, I think the game looks good enough, even with it off, to not really get much benefits from ray tracing compared to the amount of FPS that you lose. So yeah, I pretty much just have it like that. Okay, so for the last settings that I feel like you guys will want to know, we have my camera settings. So for this year's game, I mainly use TV offset, as TP pod offset. I used to use TV pod, and in some cases I will even use cockpit. But for the cockpit, to be honest, I probably rarely use these, maybe for special types of videos. So yeah, we pretty much use that. In terms of its actual settings, here's what they are. So as you can see, I use -19 for the field of view, -12 for the lateral offset, 7 for the horizontal offset, 0 for the vertical, -14 for the angle, and then for the near clip plane, the mirror angle and the camera shake, I use 0. I probably at some point will change. I probably will change it so that I can have car specific camera angles just to make it look a little bit better depending on what car I'm using. But for now, I pretty much just use the same camera settings for all of the cars. So yeah, that's pretty much it when it comes to the main settings that I have on F124. That's how I have it set up. If you want to know the specs of my computer for the graphics that I use, for example, I'll have that in the description below as well. If you want to know what my Moser pit house settings are for the actual Moser wheel, again, I will have that linked in the description below as well, so you don't have to necessarily ask in the comments about that. Just check all of those there. Make sure to like the video if you did. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. It helps support the channel as well. I'll see you guys in my next video.